Tiki culture was something that was largely invented in the United States and is just, grew like wildfire then from the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, then to the 60s where the Kahiki was built. The thing that people took away from the Kahiki most of all was the initial impression of this enormous, unusual looking building near Whitehall in Columbus. It was designed by Bernie Altenbach, who was their architect, designed to look like the New Guinea meeting house. But some people see it as an inverted war canoe. They put a little moat in front of it, put these huge moai on either side of the door with flaming pots on their head, and you were in a different world immediately when you pulled into the parking lot. A lot of this has been designed by Coburn Morgan.
And then Philip Keintz did most of the moai work.
Right, working from Coburn's sketches. And they also used art students from local colleges and things to create some of this. You walked in and you crossed running water. You have fish tanks on the left side, you had the rainforest on the right, and the very back you had this huge fireplace. You had exotic details everywhere. Every surface was either carved or painted.
I think one of the funniest stories was a patron coming inside, sitting down and looking into the fake rainforest. Looked out the window, saw the rain coming down, became concerned and ran out and put the top up on his convertible. That's how real the effects were.
And that was the idea. It was an immersive experience where you were sitting in little pods that had no roofs over them in your wicker chairs, being served these very exotic drinks, some of which were smoking because they had dry ice added to them.
And then with the international staff, you could be being served by somebody who wasn't necessarily a native English speaker. You had a number of Cuban refugees working on the staff. You had the Japanese and Chinese wives of servicemen working. At a time they put out an ad and they said, we're from over 15 different countries and we speak even more languages than that. And over the lifetime of the Kahiki, it became even more international and more international.
The founders, Bill Sapp and Lee Henry, prided themselves on the fact that they did bring in all these people from different cultures into their restaurant. And for a lot of them, it was their first job in the United States, and they were just learning English.
They had their costuming that was quite elaborate in the early days.
You created this whole new cuisine. Here you were taking what was essentially Cantonese recipes, adding in pineapple and other things to make this fictitious Polynesian cuisine.
There's a saying about Tiki culture that you have the food from like Japan and the alcohol is from Cuba, and every piece of it's from someplace else. You have the Hawaiian textures and flower patterns, and it really is a bunch of cultures all coming together into a melting pot.
The drinks, Polynesia, they didn't have rum. Almost all these drinks were rum-based. One of the things people always ask about is the mystery girl, the mystery drink. This was something they'd actually borrowed from a restaurant down in Fort Lauderdale called the Mai Kai.
Well, you would order the mystery drink, and then they would sound the gong, which at the beginning was a giant gong.
It was like 4 foot in diameter.
Exactly, and the mystery girl would come out, who was a separate waitress. She wasn't someone you'd seen at all that night yet. Would come out in her outfit with your drink. She would bow to the fireplace that was the moai, and she'd bring you your drink.
This was kind of a showstopper. Whatever you were doing, you heard the gong, and everybody's attention turned to that.
A number of famous people ate at the Kahiki.
Margin Gower Champion came, and Ginger Rogers.
Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Uncle Milty was there. Milton Berle stopped in one time.
And Paul Lynn from Mount Vernon,
Ohio boy,
had an unbelievable following.
Some of the first pottery was actually created by Marcy.
Marcy Sapp, who was Bill's wife. She'd gone down to Mexico and worked with ceramicists in Mexico with the idea that they would create this stuff and import it.
But then when they imported the first batch, it was all broken by the time it got here, so they knew they had to do it locally.
So they just started a pottery in the basement of the Kahiki. And Marcy worked on it along with family members, students, turning this original stuff out. And then later on, they worked with Dick Hoffman, had Hoffman Pottery, and he created the later generations of mugs and all these different items that they used in the bar.
So, I always say there's 3 ways to get this stuff. You could buy it in the gift shop, you could steal it, or you could buy it many, many years later at auction.
Yeah, and they, made, I think they said 25 of the mystery drink bowls, and most of them disappeared. The thing about Bill and Lee liked to build restaurants. He kind of lost interest in them once they were up and running. Bill liked to run them. And so it was only reluctantly that Bill agreed to sell the Kahiki.
So Bill and Lee sell to Mitch Boych, and they immediately regret it.
Michael Mitch Boych, in his travels, had met Michael So. And Michael So was a real rags to riches success story. He'd been built in China and came to the United States and worked up through the restaurant business. Mitch liked Michael So, and he wanted to provide an opportunity for him. And so he purchased the Kahiki, and after a few years, Michael So purchased the Kahiki from them. But he seemed to have been more interested in franchising. And so he started manufacturing egg rolls in the basement of the Kahiki. And he got contracts with Kroger, was selling them there. Then the Son of Heaven exhibition opened in Columbus.
Son of Heaven was a very popular exhibition of Chinese art, and so it was an opportunity to get his Kahiki brand frozen foods in front of a much larger audience. The frozen food business really took off for Michael So.
Sales had pretty much flatlined at the Kahiki. The restaurant needed a lot of renovation, and it was going to require a large infusion of cash. The neighborhood was also declining too.
Oh, absolutely.
And so it was becoming less desirable for people to go there. And so then he got an offer from Walgreens to purchase the site. And he began developing these plans for, okay, we'll sell this building and we'll open another one when we get the opportunity to.
On the waterfront, on the Scioto River.
He sold it. It closed in August of 2000, and 5 years later he died.
The Kahiki was bulldozed and a Walgreens went up. And a local land developer who was working on building a CVS at the time actually was quoted by the Dispatch as saying, well, at least I'm not tearing down the Kahiki. So that's how big a deal it was. People were really upset.
For me, it's sad that it's gone because people, I think, would have been ready to embrace it again. It is kind of a lesson to us because there are going to be other buildings here in Columbus that people are going to want to tear down. And you know that you need to get organized if you want to save them. If you really firmly believe in this, do something.